Hey everybody, welcome back. 45.63 seems to be our issue. I mean, to see how we're just bonking around in there. Bear with me as I get used to this new cursor. Kind of like it. You can see exactly where I'm at. Let me know what you think of it and the crosshairs as well. I think it's pretty easy for me to point at things. But of course, as always, I'm interested in your comments. And I got a couple emails of people that are sharing the video and said just, hey, thanks for sharing, blah, blah, blah. It was really nice. So I do appreciate everybody who shares these videos, whether it's social media or by the water cooler. There's still water coolers. Anyway, you can just kind of see what's happening in here. Let's just mark it off. You should be able to see that 45.71 pretty clearly, 45.80. So this is not really rocket science, guys, where we're at. 45.46 and 63 seems to just be our nemesis. But since this break on Monday, where have we gone? We've gone nowhere. We've gone absolutely nowhere. Okay, so since this break, Monday, the 20th, where have we gone? Nowhere. We've gone sideways, guys. Right, so that's what's happening now. Now, this shouldn't be new, right? We've been doing this. They've been stepping us and stepping us and stepping us. And we have a lot to go over. I mean, one of the things I got asked a lot about was please do a lot more on Argentina. I'm going to do the basics this evening. If that's not enough, let me know, and then I'll dig into it. But let's look at the RSI here. So we got oversold already. So let's clean all my nonsense off, and let's drill into this. All right, so we're already oversold here. And then we went to overbought, we got over the 50 line. So we're in overbought territory on the hourly. And that's the most we got out of it. Okay, so that is very different than what was going on here where we were overbought and we're coming back to that line. See, not only do you want to know what's going on with RSI, but you want to be able to read it. And what do I mean by that? Here's extremely overbought conditions. 90 is through the roof. Comes down to here. And I think we saw 80 basis points from here to that level where we were just there. Was it 80? 30 basis points is what we got out of that. 30 basis points. Even if we come here and stretch it, what are we getting? 60 basis points. And we were talking about how insane that was and how strong the market was. And then we have another one right here. And so what you're doing is you're just measuring the distance at, 70 basis points. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to understand. Now here we get our first real oversold since the 9th. And from oversold to overbought, from here to here, we all of a sudden have this kind of bounce from oversold to overbought. And that got us 1.5%. Now, obviously, this is not as strong as that, which is also telling. But look at this. Okay, we can see that bounce to overbought, and that's just because it's over the 50, so it's overbought. But here's oversold to overbought. We got 35 basis points, guys. That's a little bit of a red flag to me on the short term. So are we getting a little toppy? Let's take a look at the 4 hour. No, we rallied over. You can see the negative divergence here. Hopefully you can see that, but let's just pop that in so that you can see it. And no, it's not perfect. I got it. You don't have to comment on that. I'm fully aware it's not perfect. I mean, I can make it perfect. I can just click on that and move it up to here. And then I could just move that one there because I can already see it's coming in the comments. So you can see right here, right, your negative divergence. So that shouldn't make you feel warm and fuzzy either. Comes down to 50 and that's all we get out of it. I don't know. I'm a little uncomfortable. Now I am seeing rotation, which is nice. And we'll get to some of those names at the end of the day because you're rotating out of some of the bigger dogs and in here. But this is getting kind of toppy in here, guys. When you're over 70 and you break under 70, I did a whole video on this. You just want to be aware of it. It doesn't mean, and people need to get out of their head. It doesn't mean that every time you're going to pull back, you're going to drop 10%. It just means you're toppy. And it doesn't mean that it also can't have one last push. It just means you need to be cognizant of where you are. That's all it means. So please don't take it for more than that. And you see how we've been trading in here since the 20th. Take a look at the NQ. Same thing. Look how we got over. And we're just sitting up here. So we're going to want to watch this and we're going to want to pay careful attention to it. What got me today was it just felt like they were trying to lure us in all day. Maybe we're going to be slow like this until we have Wednesday's GDP and Thursday's PCE and go from there. But that could be a possibility. The bond auctions were, you want to say they were a non-event, but they weren't a non-event. But I do think we need to watch this 16 level and realize that we're struggling up here. Now, are we struggling? Or are they really just working us off? We don't know that yet, and we're going to have to find that out. But here we are again on the hourly, and let's just talk about this. We're already overbought, from oversold to overbought, and let's take a look at that move. That's not a lot, 80 basis points. So these are starting to give a little bit of, I won't call them like red flags, but let's call them yellow. Let's look at a little caution. We've come far in a very short period of time. And there's obviously a new game in town with what's going on with Argentina and the oil market. So we could talk about that a little bit. But even RTY, what are we doing here? To clean up all my nonsense. You're building a huge flag, guys. And you're building a huge flag right under the 55. So what I'm seeing is whether or not we want to say we're seeing it, we're seeing rotation. ARK, it's up. You might not like her. I really don't care. Right here, 22.55. I use a 12, a 22, and a 55. I have a 22.55 cross. So always you want to just take a look at this stuff and say, well, what happens when we make those kinds of crosses? Is that something that usually has some kind of follow through? And it's just something that you might want to mark off and say if there's anything that would say that this is something that we want to pay attention to. And I would make the argument that you might want to pay attention to a 22.55 cross, the way it's acting here, the way when it broke here. I kind of really didn't, by the time it broke, it was kind of over, wasn't it? The party was kind of over. But we do want to watch this, and even if it does pull back, maybe we still have a long bias. We got in this when it broke out, I'm going to say somewhere in around 40. I have to go back and take a look, but I think we're in around 40, up around 11% in it. And it looks great, so I don't see a real reason to doing it, but you are rotating into different names. We'll go through some of those names at the end of this video. But we can't really say it was a non-event today because what else do we have? Well, we have another 22 cross. I use a 12, a 22, and a 55. You should use what you're comfortable with. So here's your cross, here's the break. Here you are below. And what is this telling us? Was today a non-event? No, it was not a non-event. They bought bonds based upon 4 bond auctions today. So was this a non-event? The answer is no. It was an event, and it was positive for the bond market. So however we want to feel about this and this day, and say this 27th, this is where we opened, and this is what's transpired. They bought bonds today. All right, they bought bonds today, and the bond market rallied 2%, and ES and NQ and RTY did not go up. Okay, so are we getting to that point where we have to say, you know what, maybe we're going to take a little bit of a break here. Maybe they're going to put the brakes on a little bit. Maybe they're going to wait and see what GDP is. It could be that way. I mean, this is the one thing I was saying in the pre-market live when we did that this morning that I thought was actually really very helpful for people. And I just want to get this out there. Do you feel like, does anyone truly feel, and you can put it in the comments, do you feel you have less to worry about now than you did before the pandemic? I sure don't feel like I have less to worry about now than before the pandemic with the market. You have elections, you have, in 50 days, are they going to close the government down? You have earnings, you have tax selling going into December. And we're trading like, everything's good. And we're at levels that are pre-pandemic on the VIX. I'm not getting that. I'm not buying it now. We could be rotating into different sectors, and that's why. But, as you're going to find out, Argentina and the Argentinian trade, what's really important about it is their market capitalization is only $100 billion. So it's not like we're going to see a lot of risk takers. And there's some people whose charters, meaning institutions, they can't even buy in here. So I did get a lot of comments on Argentina, this Argentinian trade, which obviously some of these names were up pretty big in if you've been following for some time, to explain this a little bit more. So that's what we're going to do. Now, one of the questions I'm getting a lot about, and a lot of your comments I really appreciate, were on Argentina. And why this is important is because I read all your comments. I read a couple of them where people were talking about, wow, this is a really clean comment section. It's meant to be clean on purpose. It's actually monitored, and we make sure that we have the ability to actually comment on what's actually going on out there. And the reason that I do that is so that it can be an actual discussion board. And I find that extremely helpful to say the least. So I want to start by saying that it will be like that. So when you comment, your comments will be read. I usually answer all of them in a timely fashion. If not, it just means that I got super busy. So I do appreciate that. But I do want to talk about this gentleman that just got appointed, and I think that this is really very pertinent. So I got a lot of questions about Argentina. So I'm going to run you through why I think Argentina is important and what's happening there. So the president-elect winning margin is a strong message for reform and radical change, but he does not control any of the provinces, and I want to be really clear about this. Limited representation in Congress, noting short-term pressure points, including payments due to the IMF and bondholders, okay? I am not an expert in Argentina. I can tell you macro what's going to happen by what he wants to do. Whether or not he's able to do that is why there's the disparity between where the stocks are now, even though they move, they should be a lot higher, and where they could, what could go wrong. And there's a lot that could go wrong here. So we must understand that. But I think it's important to note that at this time, they're still underweight sovereign debt. This is from Goldman. Their notes. I was encouraged by his decision to not to nominate this gentleman that was a strong advocate of dollarization as central bank governor. Now, why is that important? Well, there's a couple reasons. So I want to talk about why I think it's important. First and foremost, Bloomberg reported that Argentina president is heading to the U.S. On Sunday night, while his incoming foreign minister will travel to Brazil to invite President Lula da Silva to December 10th inauguration, and his delegation will meet with officials from the U.S. Treasury. The White House, okay, so his delegation right here is going to meet with officials from the U.S. Treasury and the White House. So that might be why he's not trying to be overly anxious with what he's doing. He might be looking for some kind of leverage. What? I have no idea. I am not an expert in this at all. And then, of course, he wants to meet with the IMF. Why? He's in Washington. Why not? According to text message from a spokesperson, the purpose of the meetings is to explain the incoming administration's economic plan, including the fiscal adjustment, monetary reform, state reform, and deregulation. This is the important word out of everything that's on here, deregulation. The delegation is not seeking financing on this trip. Now, if you believe that, I have a bridge to sell you. What we're seeing already is we're already seeing names that we've been talking about for some time, and they're starting to get upgrades. And I want to go through all this data, and then we'll start looking at some charts. But if we pay attention to this, we're going to see very clearly that we're already seeing upgrades in some of these energy names, such as this YPF that we've been playing with. Now, if you've been following us for some time, we started buying this in the 14s and the 15s. Now they're getting upgrades. This is from Goldman. They went from a sell to a neutral. And what they won't tell you about that is they won't come out and tell you that, by the way, they also doubled the target price from 9 to 17.5. They're not going to come out and just fall right in line, but I would pay attention to these words. He believes that the change in government in Argentina could drive an increasing investor focus on future FCF, right? So now they're focused on cash flow, despite the short-term challenging environment, which could eventually turn positive if the new administration drives a turnaround of the company. Remember the word deregulation we just saw? So now you have an area. Picture how well oil companies would do if there was deregulation in the United States. Now picture that happening in a country, and now let's talk about what they're going to wind up doing with this and how this all fits together. So again, changing government could drive increased focus for future cash flow. Within our broader energy infrastructure and transportation coverage, the change in government in Argentina could lead to a re-rating on the name in a scenario in which the new administration is less involved versus the prior administration. In other words, we're deregulating. We're not telling you where to sell your oil. We're not telling you what to sell your oil for. We're not telling you what price to sell your oil, and we're not telling you where you need to have it parked. Right? Very different when you deregulate. Also, with the new president's platform, investors are likely increasing to look to price in a company potentially operates with increased focus on cash generation rather than cash burn to fund CapEx that incurred under the previous administration. See the change? Now, while we're still talking about energy, and that's where my focus is, energy and banking, it's important to understand that this is happening in telecom, energy, banking, basic materials. Everything that is in Argentina is going to go through this. That is the purpose of what's happening there. That's why we're seeing the stock market rally so much. Should oil prices in Argentina converge to international parity? So this is a fancy way of should Argentina actually be able to sell where the rest of the world is selling, it implies that YPF could increase price of oil 6 to 7, blah, 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 the domestic market, which could lead to blah, 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 blah. Bottom line could translate to 550, 650 million increase in EBITDA for the company. Now picture that across every single sector. Finance, basic materials, every single sector. Telecom. Now you understand why these names are going up. Now this is where it gets interesting to me. You're going to take a currency that is completely overinflated, and this is Greater Buenos Aires, CPI year-over-year growth 142, City of Buenos Aires 146. Okay, what's happening here? It's just tearing, right? We're just watching it completely tear up. Okay. What's going to happen when they're no longer tied to the peso and they're tied to the dollar and the dollar continues to depreciate? Their inflation is going to fall off a cliff. And that's really where this gets interesting. So if their inflation drops, and you can see just how insane these numbers are, but let's say their inflation drops, and this will show you the city and then the surrounding city. But it doesn't matter which one, just take one. And let's just say that we drop down. Now let's just say when we drop, we get to levels that are not astronomical, or it's hard not to laugh when you see how crazy this is and we think we have issues. But when this drops, that means everybody there has more buying power. Well, I thought this was fascinating. So we all know that Melli is up today, and we could take a look at the stock in a moment. But side note, Melli reported strong Black Friday sales event in Brazil. Outside of Brazil, Mexico inflation is also slowing and somewhat surprising despite high inflation in Argentina. Despite high inflation in Argentina, consumer confidence is rising 27%. Now, it's hard to say that this is due to the fact that this gentleman just got elected, because this is looking backwards. Is it possible that they saw some kind of change starting to develop, and based upon that change, this is what happened? I don't have an answer to that, but I do find this interesting. Now imagine what Melli's sales are going to look like if all of a sudden they don't have 140% inflation, meaning they're able to buy more goods with the dollar. I mean, that's the thing about inflation. I'm hoping that everybody understands that when you have inflation, your dollar is worth less. Okay, that's why everyone keeps complaining about the dollar and how it's rising, the inflation. You can buy more when their currency drops, or if they tie themselves to the dollar. That means they have more purchasing power. More purchasing power means they're buying more goods, means more growth. Okay? This is Argentina's FX rate. So this is Argentina versus the dollar. Now you're going to notice something that happens in July. What tends to happen July and September, if you look at this rate, you just start going flat. Now why it happened there and why it's been going like this, that you needed this amount, and this is basically what it's saying, you need this to get to this, right? And you can see how much of it you needed, okay? And you can see how that's been going since the 2019, how it's just been on a tear, the change year over year of what you've needed from their currency to get to a dollar. And then just out of nowhere, sometime in July or August, it just flatlines. And the question is, why then? We can all put on our tinfoil hat and try and figure it out. But the bottom line is they're now pegging to what? The dollar. Okay, so that inflation that we just went over is now tying itself to what? To the dollar. They're in Washington meeting for a reason. If you think they're not there to try to build ties with our country or with the U.S., you're delusional. They clearly are. They clearly have a plan. Comment below about this drawing tool too. I got a new drawing tool. I kind of like it. It highlights the area a little quicker. I don't have to click back and forth, and if I want to draw, it's a little easier. But I think it's pretty clean for me to work with. But I am curious what you guys have to say. In regards to ARGT, this is just the Argentinian ETF, and you can see how that's going right now and how it's acting. There's very little to say here, guys. We've been talking about this. We put it out in the free newsletter. And again, if you're trying to get into the community, which I know some people are, I appreciate your patience. I was overwhelmed off the wait list with the response, so I closed the wait list. It will go out again either tonight or tomorrow night. Invitations will go out for 24 hours, and then we'll shut it down for the end of the year. So if you are on that list or want to be on that list, I'm going to make sure everybody cycles through once, and then we're open it for 24 hours, and then we're going to close it down again, and we'll go from there. But if you are and you're looking, I did get some emails from people looking, so just be on the lookout. So we can see how we're acting here. Okay, so let's get into the names. So then we start looking at YPF on a weekly chart, and we're starting to see that 1875 resistance. But let's just look at this on the weekly and look at the tear that you've had going on right here, and you can see how we're acting. Now, where are we going? We filled the gap. Maybe we're getting to the top of here. We're going to have to see. At some point, will there be some kind of pullback? Yes. At some point, we're going to have more risk to what? To the upside, which is where our risk is now. Risk is that you're going to miss. Eventually, we will have that risk to what? To the downside. We just don't have that yet. But there's a bunch of names out here, guys, that you could be looking at. BBAR is one that we've been trading in the community. We're doing quite well with it. There's just a bunch of them. This just presented such an opportunity. And this is what I'm talking about. You know, we talk about the stool all the time and how you want the macro. And I'll draw the stool for old time's sake. But you want the macro, and then you want the fundamentals. Whoops, that didn't work. I might have to go pull out the stool. And you want the technicals. And let's put a top on that stool. Okay. So you want the macro, the fundamentals, and the technicals. Okay. People were selling here because of earnings. Well, they're going to have what's called a kitchen sink quarter. Well, what's a kitchen sink quarter? I'm glad you asked. It's where they throw everything in the kitchen sink and they turn on the garbage disposal because they know things are about to change. So they want the write-off, right? They want the write-off. And that's what you're seeing here. But I would be going through all these names. GGAL was another one we traded today, did exceptionally well with. This is a theme that is not tied to the tech sector. It is going to attract capital. There is something that people need to realize about this trade. When we start going through all these names and start pulling them all out, whether it's TEO, the telecom company that is just, I don't know, it just happens to be up almost 33% from the gap. When you start really digging into all these names, you have to understand one thing. The market capitalization of the entire stock market is $100 billion. That's the market capitalization. So when you start to look at this, there's not a lot of capital, right? So they have to deploy that capital, right? So this could get really crowded really fast. And I want you to just think about it for a second from this perspective. So just a real quick econ lesson. Just bear with me. I'm going somewhere with this. So I'll take this YPF. And what we'll do is we'll just click on this and we'll say, okay, 80 cents right here. And then we'll go here and we'll click on this one. I'll say 70 cents or 80 cents right here. So let's say $4. All right. So if I'm going to times $4 in earnings, and let's make it $3, okay? And I'm going to times $3 in earnings times a 10 PE, where's that put the stock? Okay, if I'm going to times it by a 5 PE, where's that put the stock? 15. All right, so these stocks are now trading at 5 or 6 times earnings, and they're going to trade, and I don't even use PE, but you have to look at the valuation of this and go, they're going to trade at this level of PE. They're going to deregulate the entire industries. And on top of deregulating the industries, they're going to tie themselves to the dollar. So I would spend a lot of time on this trade trying to understand it. A lot of people are really missing this. They're not getting it. Is there risk? There is an inordinate amount of risk to this. And there's an inordinate amount of risk geopolitically that I frankly do not understand. So I am playing it very simple. I'm playing the macro side of it. I am playing the fundamental side of it. And I am playing the technical side of it. I'm kind of missing my other drawing tool, but I will leave that between us. IRBT is something I had a position in. I still have a position in it. And we did a trade today. I'm going to walk through the trade in a moment, but I want to point something out. People say when I show like winners, they're not all winners, guys. You know, I went long. I went home long this. I came in, I'm down, period. Okay, now I traded around it and I did quite well with it. And all I did was just watch the news hit. We watched it gap down. We watched it hold. And then into this, when you started realizing that Amazon was going to fight what they said, and that this is the preliminary steps. These are the same kind of tactics that they used on ATVI, and we pulled $20 out. So when this started to happen, we were able to get in the trade and pull money out onto the spikes. And what we're doing is selling in the positive slippage. For time's sake, I'm not going to show the timestamps because I have a lot to cover in a very short period of time because I really wanted to focus on that. And now you're taking a look at this and you're just watching us ride that line, and then you start to see it start to age. And if you were just looking for the trade, we did stock and options and did quite well with a very quick trade here. And I like the trade, and I still think this gets done. I just think they're going to draw it out. And I just think lobbyists are going to lobby. There's really no other way to say it. And I think that's what you're going to see here. But I don't think that this is an absolute lost cause. I think far from it. They get to answer the questions and go from there. There are a bunch of names to go over here, and we should cover some of them. Now, if we take a look at ZS, Zscaler, you're down after hours. At the time of filming this, I did go long after hours, and I did trade it. It doesn't make sense to me. I did not listen to the call. I'm actually trading in between filming this, to be candid with you. But it's a pretty easy trade to manage now because I'm up in it. But if I was to look at this, this was really simple to me, came down. Once I undercut here and I actually started to get above the open price, I didn't even wait for the close. That became pretty clear. And then I just watched the 5 form, and you could see that we never broke the 5. I always look at stuff like that. And then you go into the 15, and clearly if we didn't break the 5, what didn't we break? The 15. So that's not rocket science. So when I started to look at this, I knew we were going to trade up into the conference call. Remember, you always trade up into the conference call. See this 4:30, that's when the call started. Why? Because if people are short, they don't know what people are going to say in here. So when they go short here, and let's say they shorted it and they killed it, do you want to take that risk? The answer is no, you don't. If you were wondering whether or not you do, the answer is no, you don't. But here, I'll walk you through it. So I'm just pointing out there that ZS is going to move crowd. I actually bought crowd after hours as well. But by the time I'm recording this, and by the time you hear this, I might not be in either. So just FYI. But I put the conference call out there so that in the room we can listen to it. And then we kind of go from there, and we're just looking there. ZS, obviously I got really technical here and just typed ouch. Down, and then I'm just stating what I'm doing by crowd, and then I'm also in ZS, and I'm just stating what I'm doing, and I was using the low of the day, the up $1. I trim because I don't know what I'm missing yet, so I'm being very conservative because I don't know what I'm missing, right? I want to make sure that I understand what I'm missing before I do anything, because it could be in the revenue and the mix, and I don't understand the nuances, like someone that is an expert in ZS, which I am not. So there might be something that you're missing. So you always have to assume that you're wrong. So you pull something out, leave stop low of the day, lowers your cost basis. Up 2, trim. We're trimming in the positive slippage. Conference call 430, 421, and we're up 2. These names get tighter to the call, 421, 431. ZM pops. trim. Stop still low of the day, and I covered half. So what we're doing there is we're just utilizing the moves up when these things pop, and we're pulling money out. Pop, pull money out. I don't know how this call is going to go. I don't know if this call is going to be exceptional or not. Now, again, at the time of recording this, you can see how it's going. But it is affecting some other names after hours, and we should talk about that. So you're affecting Crowd, and you can see how Crowd's down $2. I don't know if Crowd's going to be down $2 by 8 o'clock tonight. We'll find out and we'll see. But this is the next one that's up, and you can start seeing some of these names are really starting to break out. And we should just talk about some of the usual suspects, like NVIDIA, that's actually hanging onto this line, which is kind of interesting that it is. Microsoft in and of itself was hitting new highs today. Let's clean that up. I had a little day trade in there, but very, very small. I mean, I've added 4 times to it already on the on a swing trade. So, I mean, it feels like every day, Groundhog Day, I'm interested in that. Tesla, you need to still watch the same level we talked about in the pre-market live. 231.78 was the level that we kept talking about. 231.78. That's the level that we keep talking about. And that's the level that I would pay attention to on this. Let's just drop these in so that you can see you're still battling in here, guys. There's still a battle going on, and I don't see that coming to an end. 3 names that are shocking to me in their strength. Now, I covered this on Saturday, and I said, you want to watch this. You definitely want to watch this. This exceeded all expectations. People in the community traded it, did exceptionally well. I was busy with other names. I did not trade this, but they did exceptionally well. I've been building positions in some of those Argentinian names, so I've been hyper-focused on that, but I still was calling this stuff out for everybody. But this looks really very strong. I mean, it's hard to not look at that and just go, wow, you gave nothing back. Speaking of giving nothing back, coins struggling with this level up here, this 120. You got a couple key levels you need to watch right here. You can screenshot that if you want, go from there. You have to look at this Affirm, and you have to be impressed, because now you're over the wick, right? Wicks are what? Price rejection, and you're over it. So I would definitely be looking at those 3 tomorrow and seeing if there's follow through. And you really want to pay attention to ZS and see what the comments are on ZS into the morning, because that is going to affect Crowd as well. And Crowd comes out with earnings tomorrow night. That's it.